All right, I'll call this meeting to order. I can go through this probably as quickly as possible, and you can slow me down. But the first element on the screen here basically just had the process, no change to that. Timeline, again, no change. Key next milestones, looking for the February 28th to get neighborhood input, setting up for the March 1st hearing, so that's basically the same. And then we come back on the 8th and review the input. I did want to, before I forget, I did want to say I'd like to try to avoid, if we could, any scenarios until late March, because I'd like to get the public input. We talked about it on the 8th. So we may do building blocks. Building blocks is like getting the juices flowing, where the kids at, who's where. No scenarios until late May, March.
And this is probably out of order, but have you gotten any responses to your,
Yeah. Yeah, so there's been some small group set up. So I've already had a couple small group meetings. There's a couple more set up. We got the Horn listening post. There's been, if anybody emails the whole board, like with a question, I will reply process-wise. But people have been asking questions and getting organized. I was at a meeting last night that was a neighborhood meeting, and I came in and gave my 2 cents for the first 20 minutes, and they went and did their thing. So we'll see. I don't know. I will tell you the other thing is people ask me, well, should I, like I live right beside the school, should I do it? It's like, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. You need to decide that. I can tell you what I think about the scenario, but please make that decision for yourself, because, I don't want to tell somebody not to do it, and then it becomes, Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Neighborhood input's the same, just some minor edits. I did provide some new information in a one-pager on advice. All these are the links. Try to provide people a one-stop shop for everything they might want. So there's this year's attendance process, Appendix 5, attendance zones map, walking radius, that's pretty key, right? The 2-mile deal is pretty key, especially if people are making recommendations. Facilities master plan, enrollment, history, school snapshots, enrollment. Again, I just had my little advice on how to, approach it, and then the only other key thing that I've been telling neighborhoods is I try to keep it smaller than bigger, because you're going to find opinions start to vary as you get bigger, and it may be harder to move a big neighborhood, right? If there's not capacity somewhere. So just trying to get people to think about the Appendix 5 thing. So if you're asking to go to a school, is there capacity there? If you're asking to go to school, are you walking there? Are you walking today and walking tomorrow? Or are you bus today, walking, you know what I mean? Things like that. So unless there's questions, I'd say.
Question. Can you clarify, you said a couple of times, if a bus is your priority, then tell us that. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Sure. So if, let's just take a theoretical example in North Liberty. Not theoretical, but. So let's say somebody said a bus is my #1 priority. Now, normally you might want to say elementary, but I think if people came back and said, hey, my bus is #1 priority, what are my options? It could be, for example, Christine Grant. We need kids to go to Christine Grant. If you're greater than 2 miles, you get a bus. Or if just come back and say, hey, I'm somewhere else and my #1 priority is a bus, then let's talk options. Again,
So you're thinking of that in terms of people who live more than 2 miles from the school that they would be assigned to?
in all likelihood,
Not putting in discretionary busing.
it's up to us, but I think a lot of these examples would be, are you flexible going to different schools? That could be for capacity, it could be for other opportunities. But, maybe this isn't the board's point of view, but I'm getting a feeling from this board, we like walkability. And I think when we get into boundaries, you're gonna find walkability is gonna be a big deal. And then if you're bused, and this has always been my personal point of view, once you're on a bus, you're kind of flexible. And, we may need to use that to, meet our capacity needs. But I think it's a question. I'll just spit out an exact example. If you're 1.7 miles from Penn and you're 2.3 miles from Christine Grant, and a bus is your #1 priority, and we're trying to figure out which schools students need to go to Christine Grant, I think we would consider the people that want busing. Personally, I think we're gonna find that, and again, this is just one area, but I personally think we're gonna find that Van Allen, Garner, and Penn will be walking schools. And why do I say that? Because there's a boatload of kids within 2 miles each of those schools. So I think if we sort out who wants to walk to those schools, that's gonna fill them up. And then the people that are like, no, I just want a bus, then welcome to Christine Grant. Now, it depends where it is, and islands, you know what I mean, but that's kind of what I would mean.
One question that I had is obviously, the impetus for this is linked to facility master plan and the opening of Grant in 19, and the opening of Hoover as its own entity in 2019. But there is this definite domino effect that goes from those immediate catchment areas that affects, it's kind of like a shockwave that rolls through the rest. And one of the questions that I heard was, well, our school isn't anywhere close to either of those two elementaries, like take Horn, for example. And my advice is take part in the process, because there is a potential, if there's something that you want to express as a neighborhood, and you canvass your neighborhood and there's a recurrent theme there, then express it. Let's get that information. It's not just exclusive to the geographic areas surrounding where Grant is going to be built and where Hoover is going to be built.
Regarding the busing, I would like us to potentially talk or evaluate whether we would want to use busing as an incentive to reach our aspirational goals at some of our schools. So for example, if a neighborhood is the same distance from a high FRL school and a low FRL school, if they're assigned to the high FRL school, could there be some incentive for that versus going to the low FRL school, which would usually be the preference, I think.
Personally, I'm open to those, I call them give-get conversations, right? I mean, if we're giving a bus when you could walk, then what's the get? I mean, and there needs to be something, otherwise.
Would that need to go to policy and governance, or what? Or would we? How would we do that?
I don't think so.
We could just say you are less than 2 miles from both schools, but because you're helping out the aspirational goals of the board.
I think the answer is it depends. Is it something you're going to want to make a policy that's applicable to everybody, or is it just, this neighborhood has volunteered to do something and we're willing to accept it and call it good, I don't know. It's impossible to tell because it's too hypothetical.
How do others feel about that idea?
I'm not sure I totally understand what you mean by the incentive idea. I kind of agree with Chris that if somebody's going to be on a bus anyway, then there's sort of more fair game to use to meet whatever goals, capacity.
So an example would be on the east side of town. I don't have a map in front of me, but there's places where people are less than 2 miles from schools of vastly different FRLs.
So are you saying we would suggest to people to particular neighborhoods that, listen, if you all
If busing is a priority for you, and if you don't feel you want your kids to cross whatever street, it's not safe, then potentially request to go to this school instead.
or, are you saying request to go there, or, we're thinking about putting you there, period?
Well, I
It's a conversation.
I think, yeah, I think typically what happens is nobody wants to go to the high FRL school.
You're suggesting, well,
And I'm not,
it depends.
I'm talking about when we're less than 2 miles from multiple schools.
Right.
And everybody wants to go to the low FRL school. Nobody wants to go to the other one.
Yeah, but if we take a neighborhood and put it at a high FRL school to bring it down a little bit, then there's really, no particular reason leaping out why they would need a bus. Give them a bus just to compensate for the fact that we did that, or?
Yeah.
I feel like I need at least some kind of particular reason why there's an especially compelling case for discretionary busing.
Well, and when it comes to the aspirational goals, we do also include ELL and special education learners at the 20% level as well. So I would assume that if we're going to talk socioeconomic,
Yeah, I think it's sort of shorthand for all three of those.
for all three, is that what we're
Right.
talking about? I just want to make sure that I'm
Mhm.
hearing
Balance.
balance.
But that's why I think if they come forward and say, hey,
So incentivize people with transportation.
this is my number one priority, we could at least say, here's a couple options.
I think that would be nice. I think it would be a way to get us to embrace balance without having to hit them over the head with it. Honestly.
And what I like about the whole, if you want a bus thing, one, go talk to your neighborhood and see if you're aligned with that, because automatically in play is your attendance zone, and some people are gonna come back and go, oh, never mind.
Right, yeah.
But it's forcing people to try to make the same decisions we gotta deal with all the time, right? And I know there's some neighborhoods that got, they think it's a good idea, and then they get together and go, we don't wanna split the neighborhood, or, you know what I mean, it's interesting, when people get together, it's just like our listening posts, small groups, right? We make these small groups go talk, sometimes the outcome's different than they thought going in, partly because they become more educated. But let's see, I just keep incenting people to participate is what I'd say, and let's see what happens. But any questions on the rest of this? Cool one-stop shop for links. Building blocks, the intent of this was just to kind of, again, get the juices flowing. I'm not going to go through all the maps. You'll get the idea. But just so you know, so this just happens to be Penn, right? So it's the 1 mile. And I just want to point out to you, it's not all the kids in 1 mile, all right? So when it's a school that's existing, this is where the kids are going to Penn. So you see there's a few in Gardner, but I just
Those
wanted to point.
little squares are kids,
Yes,
and those are only the kids who currently go to Penn,
yes,
even though there might be a kid in there that goes somewhere else.
yes.
Those don't get squares.
So the exception are, when you look at Christine Grant or the Hoover East, that's all the kids. So I just want to point out that difference, okay?
Oh,
Now-
I see, right, yeah, it has to be, right,
Now, this gets into a key concept we may want to think about, and maybe we'll have options based on this, but do you start with the current boundaries in your mind, or do you start with a fresh slate of
No.
paper?
I wouldn't mind if we could get a map drawn up that's just everybody, the closest school map,
We'll probably do both.
with numbers for how
Yep.
many people are at that school.
And it'd be interesting
Just
to
went by that, which we obviously can't do, but just as a piece of information.
It'd be interesting. I just think these will be two different ways to go at it, so assuming current boundaries are just starting over. But I just wanted to let you know that's what you're looking at, all right? And then this is the two mile map, right? Just Penn, again. I'm just gonna use this as an example. And then the 2 mile radius is key because this kind of gets in whether you're bused or not, right? So that's kind of what you're looking at. I'm gonna go all the way to Christine Grant because it's the same for Gardner, it's the same for Van Allen. That's where we come.
So while you're scrolling, can I ask a question? On this attachment,
I'm gonna get there.
which one it is?
Yep.
The number that's on the end, is that the number of students that live in the area or the number of students that are currently going to that school?
That is the number of students currently going to that school.
Okay.
So I'll bring up Lori's questions.
Okay.
So just know that when you're looking at Christine Grant, this is all the kids, so especially when you get to the 2 mile deal. All these kids over here are Penn Gardner, right? So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. So I won't go through this for the east side, but it's the same deal. The current schools, it's just the kids going there, and then for Hoover East, it was like a big, grabbed everybody, all right? So this was Lori's question. This is the total number of kids at Chivik. Yes, that's the total attending there. They could be from all over the place, but you got less than 1 mile, less than 2 mile. These more than 2 mile could be in the Shimmick zone, or they could be an open enrolled for who knows where. Now, I've already asked Steve.
Do we have that? Well, I mean, I know we have somewhere where it shows significant amounts of kids that have open enroll, I mean, not open
Yeah.
enroll, I'm sorry, but.
It's in the original PowerPoint, the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
attachment,
that's why I'm like, I know I've seen that, okay.
right near the back. That kind of tells you where they're at and all that good
Mhm.
stuff, but
Right.
So just to clarify, so the furthest right column is how many are there right now?
yep,
And the other boxes are kids that are attending that school. But there could be a lot more kids that live less than 2 miles,
that's right.
but that's not shown on this chart.
That's right. The exception is Hoover East.
So all
Is
public
all.
school kids within a mile.
So that's those 800 kids within 2 miles.
That's a good point, yeah.
And the same. So it's all the kids going to the current schools, Grant's the exception. That would be mostly Gardner and Penn students, right? So Steve's coming back with all the numbers on the live-in versus attendance and what are the balance numbers for all those, so we'll get that. I think the other thing we'll spend our time on is where are the kids being bused or would be, like who would be the walkers and who would be the busers, and trying to sort that out as a building block. You can kind of get it from the 2 mile radiuses, but kind of getting into the numbers. So if we come back on the 8th, we may have a little more information on the live-in attendance, and we may have a little more information on who's bused. And then we can start talking turkey on, okay, here's the type of scenarios we want to see for the second meeting in March.
When will we know about the open enrollment, intra-district transfer issue with the Sinus schools? We're
Well, we're going to talk to the education committee, so why don't we do that? I mean, it's on there, the Every Student Succeeds update, I think, pretty sure.
And look.
So we'll be making a decision on whether, no, because we don't know what the state's going to say yet.
Right.
So that won't be part of this equation of you
Depends how-
live here, you go there.
Depends how aggressive you want to get. Depends if you're,
Well, if the state's not going to back us up,
I don't think we'll have any
Yeah.
guidance on that, yeah.
yeah.
I think the first step is to figure out the live-in versus the, what do those numbers look like, what's it mean? It's an evolution versus revolution conversation, right? And again, there's a couple things we stopped paying for sign-up busing. 11-12 was the last time we paid for all sign-up busing. The new voluntary transfer system really just went in last year, so we're evolving to incenting neighborhood schools, and it's a question of do you want to accelerate that or not? But I think the live-in versus the attendance is a fair question we need to get into. I just think it'll be part of this process. All right. Capacity. Really, there's no new news here. This is what I'd suggest. Come out of this, if you have questions or things you think you're going to send them to Steve and I. We'll just keep the list going. And we'll just start gathering questions now and trying to get ready for March. So this is all just about getting ready for March. Is there anything specific we want to talk in capacity? Anything else from 10 zones? Say next milestone's February 28th, neighborhood input, March 1st hearing, and then we do it March 8th, work session. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
10:13.
He won because he was going on the meeting. So I said, so if you win, does that mean you have to bring him? Or?